Unveiling the Narcissist's deepest fear, what they keep hidden from you. Narcissists are haunted by a multitude of inner demons far beyond what the average person endures. These are not fleeting insecurities or minor regrets. They are profound, festering emotional wounds and unresolved psychological conflicts that the narcissist lacks the capacity to confront. According to clinical psychologists, narcissists exhibit an extreme avoidance of self-reflection, often because facing these inner shadows would threaten the fragile structure of their grandiose self-image. Unlike most people who engage in introspection or therapeutic work to process emotional pain, narcissists suppress their demons, shoving them deep into the psyche in an attempt to maintain an illusion of control. But psychologists note that repression is not a solution. It generates mounting internal pressure. This is why narcissists instinctively seek external targets, partners, friends, or colleagues, onto whom they can project their unresolved rage, inadequacy, and self-loathing. Projection, in this context, becomes a survival mechanism. The narcissist cannot tolerate the chaos within, so they externalize it, often in destructive and manipulative ways. Every relationship a narcissist enters bears the mark of toxicity. Psychologists studying narcissistic patterns consistently observe that these individuals harbor a strikingly consistent narrative about their past partners. Everyone else is to blame, and their exes were always horrible, unreasonable, or crazy. This repetition is not random. It reflects both their inability to take responsibility and their compulsive need to control the narrative of their life. To the unsuspecting partner, this pattern can feel bewildering and isolating. Narcissists often fail to address you by your proper name, instead resorting to diminutives or terms of endearment like babe, hun, or dear. Psychologists explain that this tactic serves multiple purposes. It infantilizes the target, creates a false sense of intimacy, and subtly undermines individuality, making the victim more malleable to manipulation. For the narcissist, each relationship is interchangeable. Their words, charm, and strategies are recycled from one person to the next. The psychological impact on the victim is profound. Repeated exposure to these patterns erodes self-esteem, distorts perception, and fosters trauma bonding, as the subtle mixture of praise and devaluation keeps the mind tethered to the narcissist's approval. Yet, even within this web of toxicity, there exists one element that a narcissist fears above all else, a truth so potent that it can halt them in their tracks. Psychologists define this as the narcissist's existential threat, any unvarnished revelation of reality that exposes their flaws, dependence, and moral deficits. Narcissists dread truth because it undermines the elaborate defenses they have constructed over years, sometimes decades. They are so preoccupied with maintaining the illusion of perfection, significance, and control that encountering unfiltered truth becomes unbearable. Clinical studies suggest that narcissists perceive truth as a direct attack on their identity. They are incapable of integrating it without experiencing extreme anxiety, rage, or manipulative backlash. Therefore, they will go to great lengths to avoid it, often lashing out at anyone who threatens to expose their reality, perpetuating cycles of emotional abuse to maintain dominance and self-protection. So what is this dreaded force that can unseat a narcissist? Simply put, truth. Truth is more than mere facts. It is the unflinching mirror of reality, revealing who they truly are, what they depend upon, and the shadowy dimensions of their personality that they work tirelessly to conceal. Psychologists explain that narcissists are inherently dependent on others for validation, admiration, and a sense of self-worth, and truth threatens to strip away these carefully constructed illusions. When the narcissist is at the pinnacle of their perceived success, charming, admired, or socially elevated, truth is especially dangerous. It has the potential to unravel the fantasy they have meticulously maintained, exposing vulnerability, moral corruption, and dependency in a way they cannot endure. Narcissists respond to truth with a complex mixture of denial, projection, and rationalization. Psychologists classify these behaviors under defense mechanisms, which are unconscious strategies to protect the ego from anxiety and shame. When confronted, even indirectly, with reality, narcissists often fabricate explanations, shift blame to others, or recast themselves as victims rather than perpetrators. This behavior is not merely deception toward the external world. It is also self-deception, a way to preserve a sense of omnipotence and righteousness. By continuously rewriting their narrative, they can reinforce the illusion of control, masking the inner chaos that they are too frightened or incapable of addressing directly. For the victim, recognizing this pattern is crucial. Understanding that these distortions are a defensive shield, not a reflection of your worth, can mitigate internalized guilt, self-blame, and confusion. For those entangled with narcissists, psychologists emphasize strategies of psychological self-preservation. Grounding oneself in reality through journaling, therapy, and trusted social validation can counteract the gaslighting and distortions inherent in narcissistic behavior. Establishing firm boundaries, emotionally and physically, limits the scope of manipulation, while mindfulness and self-compassion strengthen resilience against the corrosive effects of chronic exposure to projection and devaluation. The truth, while terrifying to the narcissist, is liberating for the victim. It is both a shield and a weapon, capable of severing the psychological chains that bind the self to the narcissist's toxic orbit. Ultimately, the narcissist's fear of truth underscores a central psychological reality. Their entire persona is a fragile construct built upon illusion, projection, and denial. When confronted with honesty, they cannot tolerate accountability, cannot integrate moral insight, and cannot reconcile the dissonance between perception and reality. For the victim, awareness of this dynamic is transformative. Recognizing the patterns, understanding the psychological underpinnings, and reclaiming personal power through conscious boundaries and self-care are essential steps toward recovery. As psychologists repeatedly note, the end of a narcissistic entanglement is not merely the cessation of a relationship. It is the reclamation of agency, autonomy, and the capacity to live authentically in the presence of one's own truth. For a narcissist, the truth is not merely inconvenient, it is a threat to the very foundation of their existence. Psychologists explain that narcissistic personalities are constructed upon layers of deception, carefully built to sustain a grandiose self-image and shield a fragile ego from shame. When confronted with truth, or when they sense that someone has uncovered the elaborate illusions, they react as though their survival is at stake. Their default response is avoidance, deflection, or, in the most extreme cases, aggression aimed directly at the individual who threatens their carefully constructed reality. This behavior is not accidental. It is a manifestation of profound fear, rooted in the narcissist's inability to tolerate imperfection or accountability. For the victim, awareness of this dynamic can be terrifying. Psychologists advise that recognizing the inevitability of these confrontations is essential. Preparation, documentation, and maintaining emotional boundaries are critical tools for self-protection. Narcissists are masters of manipulation, and their tactics are often preemptive. They will try to rally others against you, spinning your attempts to discern the truth as evidence of your instability or malice. Psychologically, this is an example of projection, in which they attribute their own behaviors, fears, and intentions onto someone else. It is also a defense mechanism designed to isolate the victim, undermining support systems and creating an environment where the narcissist can control perception. Victims frequently find themselves trapped in a paradox. The more they try to explain or defend themselves, the more entrenched the narcissist becomes in controlling the narrative. Psychologists recommend that in such situations, silence can be a form of strategic self-preservation. Documenting interactions, gathering tangible evidence, and avoiding unnecessary arguments prevents additional emotional depletion while safeguarding one's credibility. The narcissist's arsenal of deception is vast and meticulously maintained. By constructing mountain after mountain of lies, they create a buffer against reality, allowing them to avoid confronting their flaws, dependence, or moral failures. Yet, psychologists point out that no matter how formidable this web becomes, truth remains the ultimate disruptor. With consistent, verifiable evidence, reality begins to pierce the armor of manipulation. However, a crucial caveat emerges. Narcissists will rarely acknowledge claims without tangible proof. Their ears are deaf to mere assertions. Only documented evidence, videos, recordings, or written proof, can bypass the layers of denial and gaslighting. For victims, this emphasizes the importance of structured record-keeping and strategic communication as tools for reclaiming power and clarity. One of the most insidious effects of narcissistic deception is its impact on social perception. Psychologists note that narcissists are skilled actors, capable of presenting themselves as charming, helpful, and trustworthy in public. This ability to manipulate the impressions of others means that even those who have experienced abuse may find themselves doubted or dismissed. Over time, victims can begin to question their own memories, judgment, and sanity, a phenomenon clinically referred to as gaslighting-induced cognitive dissonance. The antidote, experts suggest, is reliance on tangible evidence and trusted validation. External proof speaks louder than words, and structured documentation ensures that the victim's reality is preserved despite the narcissist's attempts to manipulate social perception. Narcissists invest tremendous energy in avoiding any appearance of weakness or insecurity. Psychologists observe that this relentless self-protection drives them to contradict truth with layers of lies, sometimes 100 falsehoods for every single fact. This is not mere dishonesty. It is a strategic defense, a mechanism to maintain control over how others perceive them and, more importantly, how they perceive themselves. The truth is threatening because it exposes vulnerability, dependence, and moral failings, qualities they cannot reconcile with their grandiose self-image. For the victim, understanding this dynamic is liberating. It explains why confrontation rarely works and why direct attempts to argue against a narcissist often lead to exhaustion and frustration. Setting boundaries, maintaining emotional detachment, and seeking external support are critical strategies for mitigating harm. Ultimately, narcissists recognize the existential threat posed by truth. It has the power to unravel the intricate tapestry of lies, deceit, and self-aggrandizement that they have spent years constructing. Psychologists emphasize that engaging with the narcissist's narratives places the victim in danger, both emotionally and socially, because the lies are designed to protect the narcissist at all costs. Yet, paradoxically, understanding and accepting the truth about a narcissist is profoundly empowering for the victim. It allows for clarity, validation of one's own experiences, and the ability to make decisions unclouded by manipulation. The revelation of truth marks a turning point. While it may demolish the narcissist's facade, it simultaneously liberates the victim from the cycles of control and deceit. For those who have endured narcissistic abuse, the path forward requires both caution and self-compassion. Psychologists recommend strategies such as therapy, support groups, and structured record-keeping to rebuild trust in one's own perceptions. Boundaries, both physical and emotional, are essential to prevent further manipulation. Most importantly, cultivating awareness of the narcissist's strategies, projection, gaslighting, smear campaigns, and relentless self-promotion, empowers the victim to disengage safely, protect their mental health, and ultimately reclaim their autonomy. The end of a narcissistic entanglement is not merely the cessation of a toxic relationship. It is the reclamation of one's mind, identity, and life.